Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome to my channel. It's been a while, so I should probably say that. And if you're worried about that concerned look on my face because of those two huge piles of books, it's because I haven't made a video in a while where I showed you books that I've picked up from two local libraries next to me. These aren't books that I've checked out from the library. They are books from annexes, little shops that are attached to each library, and that they sell books that have been taken out of circulation from the library itself or donated by patrons, stuff like that. You probably have one close to you, hopefully. And I think I checked my channel, I think it was last April, in which I made a library book haul-ish kind of video. And since last April, I've picked up, I don't know, 25 or so books. And so this might be a little bit of a longer video. I apologize, I just didn't have the heart to break it up. I wanted to do it all in one take. So I'm going to start off with some books that don't need much introduction. So I'll just show you what I got, simply because I didn't have a copy, as far as I know, anywhere in my house, so I wanted one. There are four books here that pretty much, depending on how much you know about them, but four that probably don't need too much introduction. This one being the first, Edith Hamilton's Mythology. It's just a compilation of her tellings of Greek and Roman myths. I read this back in high school, got me second or third place in mythology in Texas-wide competition back when I was in high school. So it did its job, along with the Robert Graves version of, he did a 2-volume version of the same thing. And I also picked up more memories from high school, the Aeneid by Virgil. I don't think we read the Fagel's translation, but I haven't read this in its entirety since high school, and I don't even think I own a copy, oddly enough, so I picked this up. Paradise Lost, which I may or may not have a copy of, but I know I don't have a copy of the Norton Critical Edition, which has all of those wonderful essays and stuff in the back, so I picked this up. And probably the last one most people will know about, maybe one of her most discussed novels, Beloved by Toni Morrison, which I know I don't have, so I got that. Now, for the books that maybe require a little bit of explanation, I'll jump into those. These are the ones that I've picked up most recently. I think I got these last week. And I don't know why. Columbus doesn't usually strike me as a figure that I want to read more about, but they had two really interesting books, or they seem interesting at first glance at least, about Columbus. The first of which is called The Conquest of Paradise, and the subtitle there is Christopher Columbus and the Columbian Legacy, and this is by Kirkpatrick Sale. And this is, I noticed, signed by Kirkpatrick Sale, probably at a book event not terribly far from my house in Seguin, Texas. So this is kind of a historical critique of early European colonization of the Americas, particularly focusing on the 4 voyages that Columbus took with their long-term consequences. And I looked up a little bit about Kirkpatrick Sale. His name sounded vaguely familiar to me. And not surprisingly, he is approaching this topic a little bit from a leftist perspective. And I don't really care about historians' political leanings as long as they're relatively transparent about them. And he has some pretty interesting opinions. He's apparently an anarchist and a neo-Luddite as well. But he wrote this 35 years ago or so, and just thought it would be interesting to get a full book on Columbus, which I don't think I've read one in years and years. So I got this. And then, kind of as a companion volume, it also looked interesting. This is by Paolo Emilio Taviani. This is translated. This is Columbus, The Great Adventure, His Life, His Times, His Voyages. And this is more of a traditional biography of Columbus that just tells the story of his life, the voyages, and the world he lived in. And it's translated by Luciana Farina and Mark Beckwith. The name's down there at the bottom. Next up is a book that I've known about for a while, but I was just recently reminded of because a friend of mine in the Historathon Discord recently said he read it and very much liked it and was even maybe interested in reading it with me again, or reading it with me for a first time, but it would be a reread for him, and that is The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. Ernest Becker was kind of a sociologist, philosopher, psychologist, and it explores how humans cope with the awareness of their own mortality, basically. It blends a lot of fields of humanities: anthropology, psychology, existential philosophy. It won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction back when it came out in the early 70s, I think. And again, known about it for a long time, but mostly interested in it because of Brendan from the Discord. He said he really enjoyed it, so I know I probably would too. And next, another book that probably should have gone in the doesn't need much explanation category, but I'll give you a 30-second snippet anyway. It's I, Claudius by Robert Graves. I think everyone knows what it is. It's historical fiction about... It's a piece of historical fiction that pretends to be an autobiography of Claudius and the rise of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, full of family and political intrigue and all that good stuff. And I don't think I have a copy, so I got that. I got this not terribly long ago, too. This is... There are a couple of books in here that I'm just always surprised that I find in my local library. I live between two cities where I wouldn't be surprised to find either of these books that are about 2 hours apart from one another. I live right in the middle of them. I live between San Antonio and Austin, Texas. And wouldn't be surprised to find this in either of those cities. But where I live, a couple of these things are a little bit more surprising. I'm delighted to have found them, but this is Black Lamb and Gray Falcon by Rebecca West. And this is a gigantic, probably one of those books everyone knows about, but you'll hear about it anyway. A travelogue. It's part history, part travel writing. Describes the Balkans on the eve of the breakout of World War II. Rebecca West spent several months traveling through the former Yugoslavia in the late 1930s, and these are her reflections that blend personal observation, historical analysis, travel writing, all about the Balkan region. And this is kind of one of those books I just don't really expect to stumble across. This is Follies of the Wise, Dissenting Essays by Frederick Crews. And Frederick Crews is probably most known for being a virulently outspoken critic of Sigmund Freud. And this is kind of what the essays center around, but they're also just essays about other things: contemporary literary theory, American religion, American Buddhism, uh, sort of the American tendency to adopt Eastern religious traditions. But it's also about his slow deconversion from being a believing Freudian, which he once was, to thinking that Freud was a load of nonsense. So, some essays. Essays will be a reoccurring theme in this group of books, including this next one, which I think this makes my third or fourth book of essays by this author. So I should probably get started reading them one of these days, right? This is Due Considerations by John Updike. Essays and Criticism, and that's exactly what it is. It doesn't have a pretentious subtitle. It's previously published essays, mostly book reviews, but sometimes cultural criticism, pop culture stuff about, well, at least as far as the literary front is concerned, everyone from Romance and Mystery to Peter Carey to Günter Grass and Orhan Pamuk. Those are just a few names that I pulled out of the table of contents. But also a sizable book. I kind of like, from the scattershot reading of John Updike that I've done, I like his reviews more than his novels. I've read some of what is his novel, Lilies of the Field, and then The Witches of Eastwick. Didn't really care for either one of those, but I've just read some standalone stuff, criticism wise, and always appreciated that more. This is Some Popular History by Alison Weir. This is her book on, and I apologize for these mylar covers that they sometimes come with. This is Henry VIII, the King and His Court, and it's just a biography of Henry VIII. And one that doesn't give all of his attention to all of its attention to his 6 wives, which seems to be a common occurrence in Henry VIII biographies. So maybe we get more of the king himself, Thomas More, Thomas Cromwell, Thomas Cranmer, people like that. Next is a biography of, well, that's not right. It is, so Kenneth Miller is an evolutionary biologist. And this is kind of a popular discussion of biology, but it is refracted through his opinions and his participation in a very popular trial, which happened 21 years ago. It's called the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial. And that trial dealt the definitive blow to intelligent design as far as it being a scientific idea that you could teach in public classrooms as science. This case didn't make it to the Supreme Court, I don't think, but it basically said that, you know, intelligent design does not cut the mustard for being science. And this is sort of an incorporation of his discussion about evolution, but also his participation in the trial. And he participated on the pro-evolution, anti-intelligent design side. And by the way, it's a fascinating trial. It's a fascinating opinion to read about if you want to just Google the PDF of the Kitzmiller v. Dover trial and read the opinion. It's a long opinion. It's 150 pages, but it is full of very interesting characters who give some very, very heated testimony about what they believe. Sometimes the very, very interesting things about what they believe. And I'll leave it at that to keep this video from getting too divisive. But yeah, I've reviewed another book by Kenneth Miller on this channel. It's been a long time, towards the beginning of when I started it 12 or 13 years ago. But yeah, only a theory. And more essays, because I don't think I had. Now, there might be some repeats from other books of Gore Vidal essays that I have, but this is kind of the book. This is United States Essays 1952 to 1992 by Gore Vidal. And this is just 40 years of his essays, or I would imagine most of them, if not all of them, covering topics from history, cultural analysis, memoir, political commentary, literary criticism, book reviews. You know, if you paid him to write, he would write. And I've always thought that if you wanted to understand the second half of American 20th century history, that you had to at least reconcile yourself with the character that Gore Vidal was. So in my continuing task to do that, I both watch his interview with Bill Buckley and also the one with Norman Mailer repeatedly, because they're wonderful to watch. If you haven't watched those, they're also on YouTube. And so, I don't think I got you a side shot. Let's see, what's the page count here? We're right at 1,300 pages. So, a lot to take in. Just like Gore himself was. And this is an old book, a newer reprinting of an old book. Again, one of those books I never thought I would find at my local library annex, but lo and behold. This is The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table. And that man on the cover is the author, Oliver Wendell Holmes. And this was first published in 1858, on the cusp of the Civil War. And if you recognize the name, of course, he is Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr.'s father, Oliver Wendell Holmes being, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. being a 30-year justice on the United States Supreme Court. And this is the father doing kind of a bunch of conversational essays that talk about philosophy, culture, social commentary. And they were previously published in The Atlantic before they were collected into a book. And I've read a few of them already, just because I'm interested in it sort of as a historical curiosity. And he seems like he was kind of an absolutely insufferable person. I mean, anyone who would call his, I don't know if he titled the book, but anyone who would call his own book The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table has to be just horrible to be around, right? But I was curious because, well, I mean, he was the father of maybe one of the greatest 20th century Supreme Court justices. So, like I said, that and it being just sort of a historical literary curiosity thing. And I also found over the past, 9 months or so, a couple of really interesting pieces of natural history. And one of them is by Stephen Jay Gould. I found a copy of Wonderful Life, The Burgess Shale, and the Nature of History, with that wonderful cover on it. This is about the gigantic bed of fossils that we found in the Canadian Rockies in the early 20th century, which we now know as the Burgess Shale. And it is about 500 million years old and full of things that kind of look like those creatures on the cover. And it's just sort of a slow walkthrough of evolutionary biology and paleontology by the great Stephen Jay Gould, whose essays, I have some of his books up there. The Flamingo Smile, Eight Little Piggies, Dinosaur in the Haystack. They're all books of essays, articles actually. Nothing book length like this, but this is a full book length discussion of the British Shale. Okay. Last 7 books. Again, apologies for the lengthy video. I think my last piece of natural history. I also love David Quammen, or Quammen. This is The Tangled Tree and a Radical New History of Life. This is his discussion about how modern genetics is supposedly overturning the tree of life model, the tree of life hypothesis that was popular for so long. And with what we're learning about bacteria and archaebacteria, and gene transfer, horizontal gene transfer, he argues that life looks more like a tangled web than it does a tree. What that means, I'll have to more carefully spell out in a review once I read it, but I will buy anything by David Quammen on site because I love everything I've read by him. And this I got because I had the first volume. This is volume 2 of a 2-volume biography of LBJ. And it is by Robert Dallek. And this is Flawed Giant, Lyndon Johnson and His Times, 1961 to 1973. This takes LBJ up from his run on JFK's vice presidential ticket in 1960, and their victory, of course, and LBJ becoming vice president in 1961, all the way through, of course, JFK's assassination, LBJ becoming president, the events that were the Vietnam War, and up to 1973, which is when LBJ dies. And this is to accompany, of course, the one I already have. That one is called Lone Star Rising, which takes LBJ from his birth up through his run on JFK's vice presidential ticket. Was also really happy to see this, and I just want to give kind of a universal recommendation to anyone who is interested in art, looking, even advertising, modern advertising, older advertising, anything that's visual and that can engage you visually. This is a spectacular book, and I would pretty much universally recommend it. I've already read it. I had a class, one of my concentrations in school was philosophy, had a class in aesthetics that I had to take, and wasn't particularly anticipating on enjoying it, but this was one of our texts, and we read it cover to cover, and it opened my eyes to so much that, of course, 19-year-old John knew he wasn't missing, because how could you possibly not see everything in a painting or in an ad? This is John Berger's Ways of Seeing. And for me, it's a minor classic that looks at art. It looks mostly at classical art, people like Rembrandt and stuff like that. But it changed the way I look at images. And not just high art. Like I said, anything visual, it will teach you. It is a course in how to dissect and appreciate images of any kind, television commercials, advertisements, so-called high art, you name it. If you find a copy of this just laying around for a dollar or $2, definitely take a chance on it. This is a recent Pulitzer Prize winner. Yeah, 2022. That's recent for me. Cuba, An American History by Ada Ferrer. And this won the Pulitzer Prize for History in 2022. And it is a long 500-year history of Cuba, sort of refracted through our tangled and really complicated relationship, or its tangled and complicated relationship with the United States. The only thing about this book that I won't appreciate is, look at that print. It's so tiny. And it's also 460 pages long. The length is not a problem, but the length combined with this, I'm old. I'm an old man. We'll see what we can do with this, but they should have made it 600 pages and bigger font-wise, but I'll see what I can do. John Ferling is another historian of early America, colonial America mostly, that I really like. And I found his book about the years from, well, directly after the American Revolution up through the signing of the Constitution. So this is from Oxford, and this is John Ferling's A Leap in the Dark, The Struggle to Create the American Republic. And this kind of takes us from, like I said, the end of the Revolution in 1783 to the ratification of the Constitution. So that 5 or 6 year long period, emphasizing, as you can tell by the title, the fragile and uncertain nature of what America would eventually look like after the Constitution was written. Because it was a thing we had to make, and could have made many mistakes, and obviously did make many mistakes in writing it, but it has lasted so far 250 years. We'll see how much longer it can go. Okay, 2 more books. This is, I think I have a copy of this somewhere else, actually, but just in case I didn't want to skip out on a copy of it for a couple of dollars and then realize later that I didn't have a copy in the first place. This is by James Carroll. This is Constantine's Sword, The Church and the Jews. And this is a historical and personal exploration of the relationship between Christianity, especially the Roman Catholic Church, and anti-Semitism, tracing over the 2,000 years of Catholicism's history and reflecting on the Church's role in shaping prejudice against Jewish people over that period of time. And it is also a longer book. I never got around to reading it, but it would be a perfect one of those books for Historathon. If you're interested in Historathon, we read books about history all year long. Go see my last few videos if you're interested in learning more about it. But if you want to read a video for Historathon, or read a book for Historathon, and just want to commit to one book all year long, this would cover it. Because it starts with, well, the founding of the church, which I guess would be with Peter, and takes you all the way up through the 20th century. So it covers all four quarters, if you're interested in the subject. And another book I think I also have a copy of, but it is like a few of these others, under 27 boxes of books in my shed, where brown brown recluse spiders have probably set up shop, and I'm terrified to stick my hands in without gardening gloves, which I don't like to put on because it's almost 90 degrees outside, even though it's just March 1st. This is The Age of Wonder by the great biographer Richard Holmes. Wrote a great Shelley biography called The Pursuit. The subtitle, How the Romantic Generation Discovered the Beauty and Terror of Science. And this is just a narrative history that explores the intersection of exploration, science, and romantic culture in the late 18th and early 19th century, in Britain especially. And he looks at how generations of scientists, naturalists, and explorers transformed our understanding of the natural world while also embodying the romantic spirit. So that's it. That's the last book. That is 9 months of library annex stuff for you. Now I just have to read them all. That won't take long. I will see you soon with some book reviews. I have more. I've been posting them to Goodreads, writing them diligently, and I will see you soon with more videos. Bye.